Welcome to the Nerd Party.
Let the filibustering begin.
Welcome to Nerd Party.
Hello and welcome to Filibuster here on the Nerd Party Network. It's home to podcasts that cover everything from Doctor Who and Star Trek to the films of A24 and even the films of 1994. I'm Lee Hutchison and I'm joined by Dallas King. How are you, Dallas?
Very well, thank you very much. How are you?
Yeah, pretty good. Yeah, I think this is going to be an exciting episode. So, on this episode, we're joined for not one, but two interviews with Star Trek The Next Generation's Marina Sirtis and theatre director Andrew Keates, who talks with me about their upcoming West End play, Dark Sublime. But first, we're going to have a quick roundup of what we've caught recently and our 52 films by women pick for the week. So, Dallas, what have you been watching this week?
Well, there's one film which instantly springs to mind. I watched it last night, and it's a film which is probably going to stay for me for a long time, and I think quite a few other people who it dropped on Netflix this weekend, and it seemed like half of my Twitter feed was watching it last night. And it's a film called The Perfection. It stars Alison Williams from Girls and also that traitorous bitch in Get Out as a former cello prodigy who, having spent time away looking after her mum, who recently passed away, in a scene at the beginning, which I must say reminded me a hell of a lot of Suspiria, so immediately we're on a certain path here. And then she reconnects with her former teacher and stuff like that and discovers he has a new prodigy, and then they sort of go out in the town, they become friends, so they decide to go on this trip together, and then things take a very, very odd, sinister turn, and then the batshit crazy level dials up to 11, and it was gloriously demented, and I loved every single minute of it. It was 90 minutes, but it was just insane. And yeah, if anyone has watched a Korean film called The Handmaiden, it's basically like I want to say trashier, gorier version of it, but you know, it's almost done with a sort of knowing wink in its eye, and it was just superb. And yeah, it's just the kind of thing which Netflix sort of picks up and does very, very well. And it's definitely one to recommend if you're into that kind of thing, I think. You haven't seen this one yourself, but have you heard of it? Or
Yeah, I think it's exploded all over sort of social media at the weekend, and I sort of had quite a busy weekend, and every so often I would just see people tweeting about this thing, so I had no idea whether that was even a sort of a Netflix thing or what people were sort of banging on about, but now I've got some context, and I now need to really bump it up onto the list, and ahead of some of the crap I've been watching on sort of Netflix recently.
Oh, I mean, some people will certainly probably call it crap, but for me it was glorious trash. I mean, this is the problem with Netflix. I mean, things just drop, they appear, but certain things like The Perfection or Bird Box or whatever seem to filter through onto Twitter. And it's really Twitter where you actually find out about these films, because so many films appear on Netflix that, you know, actually finding how they decide it appears on your screen when you load up going, hey, you should watch this. It's, you know, it's almost luck of the draw, really. But, you know, this was something that was definitely worth watching if you're watching at home. Although I did manage to catch a couple of films at the cinema this week. I managed to see Aladdin and Rocketman. So one of them.
Oh, I have seen Rocketman.
What did you think of Rocketman?
I enjoyed it. It was a nice film to watch. I certainly preferred it to Bohemian Rhapsody. I thought Taron Egerton really threw himself into sort of the role of Elton John, and there was times that he is certainly a leaner and smaller version of him, but there was many a moment where I thought, oh wow, he's really kind of captured it there. And I just think, you know, I thought it was just a really enjoyable kind of Thursday night film to watch. I enjoyed it. My girlfriend enjoyed it. Did we go home and spend the rest of the evening thinking about it? Not really, but it was nice, and I think it was a well kind of rounded performance and film.
Yeah, no, I thought he was very good in it. Full credit to him for doing all his own singing, something which I believe the marketing people are pushing over a certain other, you know, big budget musical biopic which came out last year and won an Oscar for its lead performance. So yeah, they're trying to push it that way. But I thought he was good. I mean, there were times when I was conscious I was watching him playing Elton rather than, you know, watching Elton John. So, but I liked the fact it was a full-blown musical effort. You know, it wasn't going through where the songs appeared, as they would have appeared during Spike. They used the songs to illustrate certain parts of his life and stuff like that. So I really like that, and there was a real energy to it. Dexter Fletcher, he did Sunshine and Leith, which was, another potential film which could have flopped, but I thought he did a great job on that. And he's really sort of found his niche at the moment, which is sort of adapting sort of musicals based on pop stars' lives and stuff like that. So I thought, yeah, it was good. I like the fact it didn't shy away from the darker aspects of Elton's life. So I thought that was good. But I mean, I was watching Bryce Dallas Howard in it as his mum, and I was looking at it going, when's she going to play Adele in the Adele biopic? She almost looked like a spitting image of Adele. I wondered if they may have tried to get Adele for his mum at some point, but maybe she turned it down. But yeah, I thought, yeah, it was perfectly adequate entertainment, but I wasn't as blown away with it as I thought I would be. I thought it was okay, but it felt very slight. It's something that many jukebox musicals, for me, it's sort of by the numbers, really. But, I had a good time in it, but, and... it was certainly better than Aladdin anyway, which I also saw, which was, interestingly enough, 20 years on from Lock, Stock and Two Smoking Barrels. This was Guy Ritchie's directed Aladdin, but he directed Dexter Fletcher in Lock, Stock, and now Dexter Fletcher's gone on to become almost probably a better director than Guy Ritchie. I thought Aladdin was all right. It was completely unnecessary, but I think it was a better film when it tried to be something new. There was a lot more of a sort of character building for Jasmine. She became much more of a stronger character. She was more proactive in what she was doing. She wanted to become Sultan and stuff like that. And she had a song which was written by the guys who did The Greatest Showman and all that, which is an absolute banger in the parlance of our times. Speechless. This could become... Aladdin could be a film which won Best Original Song back in 1992, and also it could win Best Original Song potentially next year as well. So when it was doing its own thing, it was great, but when it was just rehashing everything else, it wasn't as strong. Will Smith, a great rapper, not X-rated rapper, no, family rapper, but singer, maybe not as strong as people would have thought, but he did have a lot of energy, but it felt like Hitch rather than Robin Williams' Genie. I think is untouchable. Everyone says, oh, you can always recast any role, but for me, I think that's one that is untouchable.
Yeah, I will get around to seeing it at some point. My girlfriend's keen to check it out, so I might catch it this weekend. But as always, sort of before our big interview, we'll kind of round up our 52 filmed by women picks for the week. So Dallas, what is your choice this week?
Well, it's one which it's not a new release. It's one which I actually found at the library. They had a copy, and it's Infinitely Polar Bear by Maya Forbes. Now, this stars, I think it came out around the time of Avengers and all that, 2014. So it was marketed as, I think someone actually had a quote basically saying, it's Hulk meets Gamora in a touching family drama. And it stars Zoe Saldana as, the wife of Mark Ruffalo's character and mother of two daughters, who is wanting to pursue a career in business. She's wanting to go to New York to do an MBA, but it means leaving her kids with her husband full time. But the problem is that Mark Ruffalo's character suffers from manic depression or bipolar disorder, which leads to the name that the kids don't understand the name, so they end up calling it sort of polar bear disorder. So he's an infinitely polar bear, and it's a really strong performance from Mark Ruffalo. Actually, it doesn't shy away from any of the sort of aspects of the mental health. Actually, I think Mental Health Awareness Week was a couple of weeks ago, so it's actually a great film sort of to tie in with that. And it's sort of a great portrayal of that. He's got highs, he's got lows. He's trying his best as a father to do this, to help his wife, to help his kids. But, he can't cope sometimes, and it never shies away from that. And I thought it was a really, really sort of strong performance. It's one which I'd kind of heard of when it first came out. It got a little bit of buzz, but I'm not sure if it ever really got a cinema release over here. And it's one which I really highly recommend checking out if you can.
Yeah, I'll definitely look to do that. And sort of my choice for the week is one that I'm so pleased to see is on Amazon Prime. And it was a film I caught last year at the London Film Festival, and it's directed by Christina Chow, and it stars Andrea Riseborough, Anne Dowd and Steve Buscemi, so you've got a hell of the indie credibility there. And it's all about Nancy, and the film is called Nancy. So Nancy becomes increasingly convinced that she was kidnapped as a child, and when she meets a couple whose daughter went missing 30 years ago, reasonable doubts give way to willful belief. So this is a really slow kind of indie film, really kind of an intimate watch, and it comes surprisingly from the Eon production house, kind of famously known for James Bond, and it's produced by 007 executive producers Barbara Broccoli and Michael G. Wilson. And this is one that you can catch on Amazon Prime here in the UK, and it is one of these movies that the central performances are so sweet and sad. I think you get kind of so caught up in this film, and it certainly will cause some debate maybe perhaps amongst you when you're watching the film. Is she actually from this family? Was she kidnapped? Is she really their daughter? And don't let sort of the Eon Association or the Bond producers make you think this is going to be any sort of big film, or with a plot like that it's going to have big twists and shock turns. This is just a really well made small indie film, and I think it's going to be a bit of a calling card for a Christina show, so definitely worth checking out if you can.
Yeah, that's a film actually I'd never heard of before, but definitely keen to check it out now. And if it came out last year, then that's a hell of a run for Andrea Riseborough to star in films with it as the titular character of one-word films. So Nancy and also Mandy as well. So she's got a bit of a theme running, which is nice.
Definitely, yeah. So yeah, two movies well worth checking out. So we'll kind of dive into sort of our main feature for today, and that's our interviews with Marina and Andrew talking about their play Dark Sublime, which also features Mark Gatiss. So it'll be taking the boards from June 25th at the Trafalgar Studios, and the play is about Ollie, who arrives at the door of Marianne, played by Sirtis, a fading, jobbing actress, and he's impatient to make an impression and to make a friend, and Marianne knows about waiting for her turn at something more substantial than a half-remembered role in a cult TV show, for her best friend and for her best friend to see her differently. As Ollie forces her back into the past and a strange, outrageous world she hasn't visited for almost 40 years, Marianne must find her own way into the future, and together they begin to discover what every good relationship needs: time and space. So hopefully you'll enjoy sort of the next hour with my chats with Marina and Andrew. It was really great to talk with them about this play, which I think sounds absolutely fantastic. It sounds like a really great piece of representation in terms of older female characters, LGBT representation in front of and behind the stage, and I think it's going to be a real treat. And I got to chat with Marina, who I love from Star Trek, about a common passion of both me and hers, if you follow her on Twitter, and that's the gallant Tottenham Hotspur. So hopefully you'll enjoy us for the next hour, and if you're looking for links and sort of how to check out the play, book tickets, commit to its Indiegogo, follow on Twitter, you'll find all of these in the show notes. So hopefully you'll enjoy it, and we'll see you again next week for an exciting discussion all about Booksmart. So we'll see you next week, and enjoy the rest of the show. Thank you very much for joining me today, Andrew. We're kind of catching you in the middle of sort of the prep for the launch of your brand new play Dark Sublime. For those that maybe aren't familiar with it, it's about a month to date before the play launches. Can you tell people about Dark Sublime and why people should get their tickets kind of booked up now?
Yeah, of course. So firstly, thank you for having me on the show. It's really, really kind of you to find time to talk to us. Tell you about Dark Sublime. Dark Sublime is a brand new play, in fact, the debut West End play by Michael Dennis. And in a nutshell, Dark Sublime is the story of the relationship between an older 1970s sci-fi actor and a fan. And what's really beautiful about it is it explores the intergenerational divides between people who are older and younger, and also very exciting, it also explores what life is like for older gay women as well. So it's a bit of a mixed bag, but it is certainly one of the funniest comedies I've ever read, and with my life and background and connection to the sci-fi world as well as theatre, I read it and I just had to do it. And then there's been lots of serendipitous things, as in who gave the play to me, and indeed some of the casting that I would end up doing for it, which is just, to be a bit sci-fi, like it was like the moons had aligned, everything came together, and I'm just delighted to be supporting Michael's really wonderful play and to be working with a really great team of people.
What's the kind of process for a play like that a script's come to you, as you say, the stars are aligned? What's the kind of timescale between sort of receiving the script and then we're sort of a month away from the play coming out? How long has this sort of play been in your head and in your world?
Sure. The honest answer to that question is it really varies on the piece that you're doing. So, for example, there's been shows where I've been dragged in last minute, and I've had to play a week, and some producer has asked me to direct something, and I've had a week to prep, and I'm in rehearsals, and lo and behold, there's the show. Dark Sublime really is a passion project, and it's got the best story, I think, of all the shows I've ever done as to how it arrived. I think it was my 30th birthday or my 31st birthday, something like that, and a friend of mine, Mark Keates, came hobbling down the stairs of the club that I was renting for my birthday. And bless him, if memory serves, I think he'd fallen over on some ice or something. It was a particularly chilly winter. And I said, God, Mark, lovely to see you. Thank you for coming. But, get yourself looked after, bless you. He was clearly in a bit of pain. And he gave me this lovely card, and we got chatting. And he said, I've just read the most wonderful play. And I think you'd love it. And I said, sure, what is it? And he said, it's a play called Dark Sublime. And I said, fine. And he pitched it in the same way I pitched you. It's a story of a veteran 1970s sci-fi actor who befriends a young gay fan. And that got me really, really excited. And then skipping ahead, I ended up getting a copy of the play sent to me. I read it. I fell in love with it immediately. And what your listeners won't know about me, I actually grew up, as well as sort of being in theatre, I have a dark side, as it were, or a secret side. And that is, I'm always very content to tell people that I'm gay, but, telling people you like science fiction is often far more of an abomination nowadays. And I grew up at a science fiction convention as a little boy, literally from about the age of 10, and then went off to drama school and set up theatre companies and ran my own theatre and all sorts of other lovely, exciting adventures. And then years later, I would go back to that sci-fi convention, as a lot of the actors that they were after for their conventions and events were actually actors that I was now working with as a director, and it was my way of giving something back to them. So why am I telling you that part of the story? The reason I'm telling you that part of the story is basically science fiction and this play has kind of been fermenting in my life since I was a 10-year-old, because I met all of my sort of sci-fi heroes as a little boy. They gave me confidence, they gave me eloquence at a time of watching television and films and really not seeing anyone like myself or any kind of optimistic view of the future, and certainly no gay people on television unless they were, either victims or clowns. And so all of these extraordinary heroes of mine, these actors from Star Trek and Doctor Who and other shows, I ended up building really great friendships with a lot of them. In fact, at the moment, I've got Dominic Keating from Star Trek Enterprise living with me at the moment. He's a mate that I met at a convention, and we've been friends for years ever since.
He's previously guested on this show as well. I had him on last year, so yeah, it's a small world.
He can talk just almost as much as I can. But anywho, there's this, so connected to the sci-fi world, and often I look after a lot of these guys when they're at some of these events, whether they need a cheese sandwich or someone to waggle a finger about the money or whatever. And anyway, I end up in Birmingham, and I meet a lady called Marina Sirtis. First time we'd ever met, and funny enough, I was with Dominic and a few other friends of mine, Connor Trenier and Terry Farrell and people. And Marina and I just hit it off. I loved her energy. I liked how honest she was. Marina's very much what you see is what you get, and I really liked that in a person. And I also knew that she had trained at Guildhall, a drama school up in London. And I asked her, I said, why haven't you done any plays in London? And she said to me, Andrew, it's my dream. She said, I would kill to do a play. I said, right, leave it with me. And then we found a few other plays at the time. I think we were looking at options for her and Gates McFadden. There was something we were looking at doing. It was also in Star Trek with her. And then obviously my birthday comes up. Mark comes down the stairs, hands me this play, Dark Sublime. And I read it, and as I'm reading it, it becomes pretty apparent that there's probably, in my head, only one person I know that could play this incredible role. When I finally arrive at this play and I read it, I start hearing Marina's voice in my head. So I sent it to her, and I hope she wouldn't mind me saying, she phoned me, and usually she's like, right, Andrew, or there's a greeting, and I'm sure the first thing she said to me on the phone, and you might have to bleep part of this, but she said, "It's my fucking life. It's my life." And I said, "Yeah, it's close, isn't it?" And there are definitely differences. So as I said, it was very, very close to Marina's life. She fell in love with it. And I said, "Well, do you want to do it?" And she said, "Yes." And so, in answer to your question, how long does it take the play to come to fruition? So this was the middle part, probably, of last year. Marina and I think, met sort of October last year, I think, or maybe the year before. And yeah, she was on board. I wanted to do it. There was a fantastic producer that I've known for years, a really dynamic producer called Jamie Chapman-Dixon. And I knew this was really special. And I took it to Jamie. And basically the way it works, often a director will pitch the play to a producer. Producers tend to not particularly enjoy reading plays. They like it when us directors come and present our precious things that we've discovered, and if they fall in love with it and the relationship is good, they will raise the money, help create the production, come up with the idea, how we're going to sell it. I'll come up with the artistic side, and lo and behold, you have a play. And the monstrous tasks they have, like raising thousands of pounds and all these other things. And Jamie read it. He said, "Wow, this is brilliant," and started working on it. And then we pulled in other associate producers, Piers Cotty-Jones, Jamie Chapman-Dixon, Mitchell Green and John Webb Carter, again, all producers that believed in it. And eventually had a meeting with Michael Dennis, the playwright's agent. And Michael is with a very, very big agency that we have over here. And it was always my worry, because you see this agency on scripts and you just think, God, this is going to be, these are serious people that, you can't help but feel apprehensive when you go and see them, because they look after some of the greatest, creators and writers in the world. And so I said, "Can you just tell me a bit more about all the other things that Michael has done?" And they said, "This is his first play," which made me love it even more, that it was his first play. And I was reading it thinking he was a very established playwright because of the quality of the work. And then Michael and I met, and he said the same thing to me. He said, "What do you think the play's about?" And I said, "I think it's one of the most beautiful stories about loneliness and about love and about loss and friendship." And he said, "I'm so glad that's what you said, rather than saying it's about, transmat beans and other sci-fi bits and pieces." Yes, the show does evolve around this fictitious TV series, Dark Sublime, but it really is about so much more than that. And Michael's writing is both hysterical and beautiful. And then we announced the show. We chose the venue, Trafalgar Studios. They loved it as well. We announced it in November. And now we are in all of the marketing stages and the casting stages last night, until God knows what hour, as with our casting director looking at some of the other actors that would join Marina. And Mark Gatiss would then later put his voice to the production. He's playing a computer. And finally, what will happen is 3 weeks before we open on the 25th of June, I'll be in rehearsal, lots of production meetings. I'm already in meetings for set designs and building this fantastic sort of, this fictitious TV series from, the late 70s to the early 80s that the show is based on. And then it'll run for 6 weeks, and you never know, we may try and put it on somewhere else, but that depends on how well it does in London. So, sorry, long answer, but that really is the truth of the matter. So, probably about 25 years in the making, and certainly about a year in regards to making this production in the making.
When you were sort of chatting with Michael about sort of creating this play, bringing it to life, did you have any sort of different opinions about who he perhaps pictured when he was kind of drawing it from? Or obviously you've spoken about your kind of past and inspirations that have brought you to this play. What kind of brought him to the play and putting it to kind of this pen to paper?
Sure. I mean, there's an honest answer in that, playwrights write lots of plays that sit in drawers. So I think, firstly, us going, we want to put that on. Of course, he was interested in that meeting, just to get to know us. The play was originally developed at the Bush Theatre, where they did, I think they did a read-through, and they did some development work on the script with Michael. And then the Bush Theatre, I believe, went through a sort of transitionary phase. Other people took over a department. And luckily for us, I think Dark Sublime got sort of lost in a box somewhere. Obviously, when Mark handed it to me, Michael's very good. I mean, Michael isn't, some playwrights can be very precious. Michael is not that. He is more interested in the right qualities of the character than he is necessarily about the name. Does that make any sense?
Yeah,
Whereas, some producers can, not ours, but some producers can be a little bit name obsessed. Or they want to put some idiot from Love Island in it or whatever. What's really nice is everyone who's making this are first and foremost theatre people. So, Michael's been really open-minded to ideas, and also, as any good collaboration is about, he's made some really fantastic suggestions of actors that, we're going to approach for audition, or we're already bringing into audition. And then you have the wild card, which is, the submissions that you get, and sometimes you've got an idea for a character, but, lo and behold, an actor will come into audition and you just, for whatever reason, you just go, there's something about that person. And I've had that so many times with other plays, whether that was directing, Stevie Webb in God knows how many productions, who was just an actor I fell in love with, to the first time I saw Cynthia Erivo, and then would later direct her in Desirose and any number of other plays that I've done. So, again, it's not that academic. It's collaborative. It's always keeping your options open, and Michael has been really great at being a playwright that is thrilled to see his play being put on. And sometimes, we'll message each other when we've got... I released a logo, for example, the other day, which was designed by Clayton Hickman, who did all the BBC sort of Doctor Who covers, and he's been an editor and just a great sci-fi designer and polymath. And he had mocked up what the authentic Dark Sublime title treatment would have been like in the late 70s. And Michael's delighted sending that to me, and our shared sort of, not just geekiness over the era and it being authentic, but also this faux TV series, and all of the detail and the correct input to make it seem like it was a real TV show, and us just getting excited from it being once a meeting where we sat down and spoke about these characters on a page, which ultimately is all a play is. It's only when you start putting real people and things onto it that you start seeing the world being created before you.
I feel so excited for you because I'm like you. I'm a huge kind of Star Trek fan in particular. I love that kind of genre, and you're almost going to build a show up from kind of the ground up. What's that like for you as sort of just as a fan of someone where you're able to craft things, designing the logos, perhaps outfits, computer voices? What's that like for you as just a fan alone?
I mean, it's obviously wonderful in every sense of the word. I mean, it is. Okay, what is it like? So the first distinction I'll make, a lot of people make a lot of parallels with Star Trek. I love Star Trek. As you can see on this Skype call we're doing at the moment, behind me there's a real comm badge from Voyager. And
I noticed that straight away.
Everyone does. That's fine. I thought I'd sit this end of the table. There's a pad from Voyager that a friend gave me from the show. And so, look, I love Star Trek. Star Trek, I think, is one of the greatest TV series ever made. However, Dark Sublime is very specifically inspired by the late to early, sort of the 1970s and early-ish 80s British sci-fi shows. And they were really different to Star Trek. Star Trek always had a gloss to it. It always addressed some really great social issues, which is why I fell in love with the show. But, you look at shows like Blake Seven, Sapphire and Steel, like The Tomorrow People, early Doctor Who. You look at all of those shows, what I love about them is it was of a time where theatre actors were doing television before we had essentially acting for camera technique. You know, so they would be playing Hamlet at the Globe one week, and then they'd be doing an episode of Doctor Who, and their performances pretty much didn't change between them. I mean, they'd be a different character, but the sort of full-bodied commitment and sincerity that they brought to these television episodes were just the same as if they were doing a play. So there is something delicious in that, and especially when you go back and watch Doctor Who, especially. You look at Doctor Who, especially. You know, you look back at some of the great theatre actors that were in that show, playing aliens to commanders to whatever. And again, their performance is as big and as committed and as theatrical as if they were on the stage at the National. So there's an energy that I love in British science fiction TV that we are trying to recreate for this. But yes, of course, the inspiration and the language that I'm sort of borrowing from or being inspired by is the likes of Blake Seven. So my designer, for example, the other day, Tim McQuillan-Wright, and we've done lots of plays together. We did the European premiere of Chinglish together. We did As Is in the West End by Bill Hoffman. The White Feather, which is world premiere of a new musical. He's sort of my favourite designer to work with. He did Moulin Rouge for Secret Cinema, the immersive production, which was just which was just so impressive. I did Blade Runner as well. I mean, he's just an amazing designer. And what's been delicious is knowing that he's been picking up the phone to sort of 70, 80-year-old designers who worked on these shows and is talking to them about the constraints that they were working in as designers, so that when we do go to the show, and I'll explain, the play does flit between being in actual episodes of Dark Sublime and the present day. And it's just delicious knowing that he's speaking to these incredible young men who were being told, make an alien planet, you know, for next to no money in a car park or a quarry. Nearly always a quarry, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And it's just delicious. It's delicious us going back and looking at the constraints and how creative they were. I love looking at some of the old props in Doctor Who and Blake Seven, which is clearly, you know, a remote control stuck to someone's arm with a, you know, bit of Velcro. You know, it's those delicious things that get me really excited. And finding a proper language for the costumes, a proper language for, you know, a logic to the props that we use in the sci-fi world, and equally being able to reflect what it's like for an actor and the kind of home they live in and the decades worth of memories that exist within her home for somebody that, you know, hasn't particularly worked and is getting older, and not necessarily wiser.
For example, when you watch these Blake Sevens, Doctor Who, Star Treks, especially of sort of that 70s, 80s periods, you know, unlike the shows that we have these days, where so much of the movies, the TV shows essentially took place on one or two sets, and they had to use every single possible angle and to really use a very little actual kind of set in space. Is that something that you've been inspired as in kind of a theatre director? Some of the ways that, you know, some of these sets were being filmed 100-odd episodes and you could find something new every time. Is that something that you've always adopted perhaps as a kind of theatre director, that kind of style that they've managed to get out of sort of TV direction in the kind of the earlier years?
Yeah, it's less, for me, it is less about the sets and the props and the costumes. For me, it's less about the set and the props and the costumes. What I loved as a kid was any sci-fi episode in the same way that Shakespeare would, where they would address social issues, but because it's on an alien planet, or because, you know, somebody's green and another one's blue, we can then talk about racism, we can talk about homophobia, we can talk about feminism. Star Trek was pioneering, of course, in, you know, having the great Nichelle Nichols on the bridge of the Enterprise, you know, and was, you know, an inspiration to the oppressed black community in America and indeed around the world, because she was, you know, she wasn't just a guest artist in this vision of the future, Gene Roddenberry's vision of the future. She gave the hope to, you know, to people that was still under, and still are under, the prejudice of just because of the colour of their skin. And yet Gene Roddenberry goes, well, I'm going to have a black communications officer, and she is going to have a role and responsibilities and duties. And that was inspiring to me as a young gay kid. Theatre fundamentally for me is about empathy. Something I think the world could really do with lots of doses of at the moment in such a divisive time. But science fiction, there's a moral message to it, and it does address politics and the idea of fairness, and that of course appealed to me as someone growing up who felt the world was really unfair because of things like Section 28 and being bullied for being gay, and I think all artists or the art that we bring into our lives nearly always comes from a sense of pain in one way or another. Behind me, I think there's, looking at this image of myself on Skype as I speak to you, there is a copy of Oscar Wilde there, which I've had since I was at school. Oscar Wilde's Complete Works. Why? Because, there were no role models for me in television. There was no gay people. There was nobody who spoke like me. So I sought out Oscar Wilde and William Hoffman, Martin Sherman, and found these extraordinary gay men that were sadly, buried in the ground because they were persecuted because of their difference. So science fiction, painting a future and trying to get the world to see things through a different lens, I think enables us to ask some really, really big, important questions. As I said, just like Shakespeare would do, made so many commentaries on, the Elizabethan court, but because it wasn't in England, he could get away with it. And audiences knew exactly what he was doing.
Do you always kind of look for that sort of messages and themes in sort of the plays that you're attracted to, and the work that you kind of choose? Is that something that you're always looking to find, or is it sort of harder to find that kind of material?
It's not hard to find. It's hard to find it when it's good. That's hard. I am always interested in telling stories about people and subject matters that are often not represented on our stages. So if you go back and look at the body of my work, certainly my most recent work over the past sort of 5-10 years, I've done plays about, the black community in the antebellum South, about American-Chinese relations and how British East Asians are, or East Asians in general, are perceived in society. I've done a musical about PTSD and mental health, lots of LGBT plays. I'm probably very well known for doing plays that are connected to HIV and AIDS. The beautiful thing about a theatre in this day of sort of phones and tablets and laptops is we, by putting people in a theatre and asking them to sit and watch and listen and empathise with some characters in front of them, it can be life-changing. The lessons that you can learn by that situation of, how many people watch television now, but they've got their phone in their hand? We're as a society, we're really losing the ability to concentrate and take in the consideration of other plights that people have, and we're becoming very selfish. And yet the theatre will present characters, warts and all, and if it's great writing, then they will tap into those great things that science fiction does, which is the human condition. And it's about honesty and truth and art and making us ask ourselves as audience members the questions about ourselves, and also to consider what would we do in this situation. And I think the more extraordinary the story, or indeed the more opportunities I can give to people on stage that are often neglected. You've got to remember that, again, going back to what I said about growing up gay and not seeing people like me, if I can put people on a stage who are not often seen in the media or on theatre, if we don't do that, then people don't have any place to see themselves as well. Everything is predominantly performed by, straight white men. That tends to be every advert, TV show, play. That tends to be the norm. And people are surprised that we're so xenophobic in this country. And yet, as we are slowly but surely trying to go, we can put people of different sexualities and colours and backgrounds in roles on television, people start thinking, oh, they can play things other than just their ethnic role. And I use that in inverted commas on purposely. They can just be perceived as an actor. So yes, the work I do, it's very important to me to get people on stage that are not seen, telling stories that people haven't considered. And finally, the most important thing that comes to theatre, truth and something that makes it magic. That's what matters to me, and that's the work that I love doing, and just disappearing into a different world. What's different with Dark Sublime is it's very much a world that I know a lot about, but I'm also really excited to explore the issues that are raised by older gay women and what life is like being a 50-plus gay women, as most of the characters are in the play.
When you were talking there about sort of this representation in terms of, lesbian women being the lead character in a play, even sci-fi plays are so rare to have the opportunity. When I'm down in London and looking for a play, I never get the opportunity to see something that tackles with sci-fi or something in that kind of genre. Yeah. Is this something where you feel that it just combines two things that is completely underrepresented in sort of British theatre and wider? Is this going to be something that is going to really reach out to those kind of people that feel underrepresented in terms of, genre and kind of seeing that representation on stage?
I think the most important thing with that is this. Remember I was saying about, fair representation on stage and, people seeing themselves and having empathy. You and I both know that science fiction fans are portrayed in a way on television, often to humorous levels. So you've got the Big Bang Theory, for example. Interestingly, I think it's the highest grossing American show at the moment, Big Bang Theory. But anyway, you've got William Shatner back in the day on Saturday Night Live, saying Star Trek fans, get a life, and you've got, whenever you see it would be fair to say there is a stereotype of a science fiction fan, which is, a fat kid in a Comic-Con t-shirt and a big can of fizzy drink in one hand who's a virgin. We know that stereotype. However, as I said, I grew up in science fiction conventions and I'm friends with actors who made these shows, and I know that's not the case. A lot of the science fiction fans I know are lawyers or doctors, or a lot of the science fiction fans that I know tend to be highly professional, thoughtful people, really good people that are just open-minded to a future, and indeed science and all of those things. So do I think it's about fair representation? Yes, of course, because of my background. I'm interested in looking, because there is a fan in the piece. There's also characters in the play who couldn't care less that she's been in a sci-fi show. And looking at that authentic dynamic between the lead character of Marianne and some of the other characters that satellite her. I also think, and it's funny though, I mean, as I was a science fiction fan before it got cool. There was a time where if you said you liked Star Trek, you'd have your head kicked in and thrown in the lockers at school. Now, everywhere I go, you've got kids waving sonic screwdrivers to Marvel action hero films. Sci-fi is currently cool again, but there is a group of us that really love what would now be deemed cult entertainment. The great stuff of the 70s and the 80s, and the constraints they're working under, and the performance style, and the ingenuity and the charm, and understanding the context of it being made. That's the stuff I really love. But then equally, I've been loving the new series of Star Trek Discovery dropping every week, and equally I found that thrilling and wonderful and enthralling. But I feel the same way about watching, Tom Baker's Genesis of the Daleks. It's just storytelling. I think the wonderful thing about science fiction, and what I'm really excited about bringing to the theatre, is this. Science fiction fundamentally is about what it means to be human in the universe. But what's glorious is some of the devices that we use and the settings we use are utterly fantastical. And I get just as excited about seeing, a scene in Dark Sublime, for example, which is on a specific planet or homeworld, as I would if I picked up Shakespeare and it says set in fair Verona, because immediately my head goes, and the designer's head starts whizzing about ideas and costume designs, and we're still telling totally human stories, just just in a fantastical environment. And I think that helps people come out of themselves, and stop thinking that it's some kind of hard drama. And finally, in regards to good storytelling, it is a comedy. So, and the nice thing about comedy is if you're laughing as much as I'm sure people will in Dark Sublime, if you're laughing, then I know you're listening. And then that enables us to say things to our audience that really go in, because people, are open to receiving information. How many times have you gone to see a play being told it's a really hard-hitting drama, and you start off closed off, your shields up, pardon the pun. But this, I think the moment the play starts, you're laughing and receptive and ready to find out about these extraordinary characters, both their hysterical qualities, but also their pain and their differences and that universal thing of human loneliness and the way it manifests and what we do to combat that loneliness.
I was kind of thinking, one of the things that kind of struck me there when you were talking about it is that, when I was younger, I liked a lot of the same things that you did, Star Trek, Blake Seven, Thunderbirds. Like, I wore them as a badge of honor. But then when I became a teenager, and I always remember this, I remember telling a friend about it last week, that I think it was like Star Trek Nemesis had come out, and I was like, you know what, I really want to see that film, it's a chance to see Star Trek again on the big screen.
Yeah.
But something clicked when I was in my early teens. I was like, oh my God, I'm a bit embarrassed to say I'm off to go see that movie. And I told people I was off to see Elf instead. And then you just fast forward a few years later, and then Star Trek's cool again. You have, Doctor Who is the mainstream. People are cosplaying as it. When do you think all this stuff completely turned? And do you think that audience that are now, proud to wear sort of their fandom on their sleeves and social media are going to be turning up to see a play like this and will find a play like this?
I think it's interesting because I think the idea of science fiction being just sort of generic blanket is as helpful as talking about just concepts like music, for example. There's so many subcategories to it. I think the fact that, these 70s, 80s shows that I'm referring in Britain were of such a performance style that I think it lends itself to theatre rather beautifully. I think if I was to try and do what Star Trek Discovery does on stage, I think I would probably I'd fail. There would be no point in doing it because, that fundamentally is about just doing pure science fiction, and actually television films and books are probably the best way to do that. Theatre is so much of it is about it being live and it being honest, and really Dark Sublime addresses what it's like for an actor that is getting older and what it's like for a young person in a world looking to enrich their lives by association with extraordinary people, and how, and as I have experienced, certainly not with Marina or any mates of mine, but you will get some actors who couldn't care less that they were in an iconic TV show, but they may have played a character that somebody grew up watching that inspired them to be an engineer or a doctor because of the role they played on the show. And I know that's, Marina's inspired people to go into counselling or, make life-changing decisions because she played a role in a show. And what I love about this is that's very universal, about the kinds of attention we crave. And certainly within theatre, because fundamentally, Dark Sublime is about a time where actors were just doing this well-loved but not hugely successful sci-fi show. Dark Sublime obviously never existed. It wasn't a real TV show. It's a playground for us to borrow from them all in some way or another. But there are some very universal things about, hero worship, and how healthy that is. And actually, people can be jaded about having fans, but actually do these, what is an actor without an audience? And I find that deeply, deeply relatable. So, yeah, I think anybody who loves sort of cult sci-fi television will see references that they love. I think anybody that loves Star Trek, certainly, or any other of Marina's sort of iconic roles that she's played, I think seeing her on a British stage is something that's very important to me. She's someone I've grown to care a very great deal about, and I love the fact that I've been able to facilitate this both for her dream of performing in the West End. And I'm very thankful to Mark Keates for giving me Michael Dennis's play, because I think he's an extraordinary writer, and it's an honour to be directing his first work. And I cannot wait to, bug him after this in a year or two and say, what else have you written? Because I really believe in them both. And I think, as I said, as much as we can geek out, as much as we like about, yes, there will be lots of iconic sort of sci-fi references in there in the designs and whatever. Fundamentally, it's a play about, heart and loneliness and entirely relatable things. And that really comes down to Michael's exquisite writing and Marina's wonderful talent as an actor.
I think that those are the universal themes that we probably all look for when we're looking to pick out a play. There may be those references that people will love, but all of us on one level or another will have experienced that loneliness, that feelings that, the character is going to be going through. And I think that makes it the play that someone, whether you come from this background or you've gone to conventions or not, will be able to see a play like this and go, oh, I can see myself in this character.
Definitely. And the other thing is, the funny thing is, obviously, the play centres around two characters, Marianne and Ollie. Marianne is this veteran, sci-fi actor from Dark Sublime, and Ollie is a young gay kid who, has created a podcast. I'm sure there was a reference that's changed. I'm sure there was a reference that he was from Bournemouth, and it was about him sort of sharing this TV show that he's found on YouTube. With a guy that he likes. And he's young, he's 21. And obviously what was weird, as I said when Marina read the play, she said, it's my life. Me being a gay kid from Bournemouth with a podcast, there's a hell of a lot of my life that I relate to in that play. And that's why at the beginning of this interview I said about serendipity. There are so many things that are in this play that have actually happened to me. Genuinely happened, and it's going to be really interesting working with the actor and facilitating that truth that I've experienced, and finding out ways of bringing in their experiences, working perhaps with great actors and replicating that. And equally, I think it's going to be an extraordinary process for Marina, because Marina was a young woman out of the UK and America doing that show Star Trek. And as great as I know she had a great time working on that show, but she was also working in Hollywood under very difficult conditions. Mm-hmm. She's, at the end of the day, Marina is an actor. She's got great credits, but she's also had times where she's not worked. And she would have had hardships as an actor. And this play looks at that so beautifully. And I think it's going to be an extraordinary, like all great rehearsal processes, I think it's going to be an extraordinarily cathartic experience for us all, bringing our lives into that rehearsal room, and a deeply honest sort of warts and all conversation that we'll be having daily about what it means to be an actor, what it means to be a fan, what it means to be a hero, and as I've said repeatedly, what it means to be alone, and also that need that we all have to be loved. So I don't think you need to know what a transmat beam is to get a lot out of this play. But I do think if you do know what a transmat beam is, I think you'll be beaming from ear to ear with some of the references that are in it.
I'm curious as well. I'm curious that with the script, how much of it can you potentially change? That when you can talk about your experiences and you think, oh, I think that line is, as good as perfect, but I think someone from kind of my, background would maybe say something a little bit differently, or Marina, you're going, well, from my experience, I might come at it in this little different way. Are you able to change or adjust the script, or is the script holy?
I mean, at the end of the day, I'm a director, so my job is to ask questions, whether that's asking questions of the actors to help them find an answer, to asking the playwright, to asking the designer, actually, that breakfast bar that we need, actually, can we make it 4 inches taller? So it does kind of fall with me. I've got to be honest with you, though. There were a couple of bits in the script quite early on that I raised with Michael, but they were only suggestions. They weren't demands. I tend to find when you get a playwright and you say, I want this to change, that's when the relationship starts to break down. But when you ask questions about, there was a few things, because, you know, I think Dark Sublime was the first full-length play that he wrote, that was a full-length play. He'd done other things like competitions and bits and pieces, but this was the first full-length play, so it sat in a drawer a little bit, and Michael had revised it a bit when we were talking about it, and there was a few things that I asked about, but then also Michael is a perfectionist, so he's also tightened some bits and pieces up because, you know, it's a brand new play. And I think on that, what is really important is, certainly in my industry, that on social media, I'm constantly hearing people saying, you know, where's the new writing? You know, I'm tired of this revival. I'm tired of that. Well, this is a brand new play. And like all brand new plays, no doubt a scene will be put up on its feet, you know, and an actor will make a suggestion, and then that might be a conversation with Michael, or it might be something that Michael is very adamant about and goes, actually, this is why I wrote this. And it's actually about the actor finding the truth in those words. So, again, it's a collaborative process. I have to say, though, the rehearsal draft I've got at the moment, and I've read it God knows how many times, it must be over 100 times now, I believe that the rehearsal draft I'm ready to go into rehearsal with is a very watertight, excellent script. And I don't perceive any changes. Because actually Michael understands this world. He understands the world of theatre. He's actually a stage manager when he's not writing, and he's had an extraordinary career working in some wonderful theatres and indeed all over the place. In fact, he's touring at the moment. So Michael understands theatre, and he also has an extraordinary mind when it comes to these, you know, cult TV series. So I mean, he's the best to write this. You know. Actually, I would say if anyone understands those two worlds, if there was any two people who understands cult television and theatre more beautifully, one is Michael Dennis, the other is Mark Gatiss, and I've got both working on this production. So, you know, I have no concerns.
Those are names that will get everyone kind of paying attention. And obviously for people that are interested in, say, buying tickets, there's also, I've noticed there's an Indiegogo campaign as well for the play. If people wanted to contribute towards this amazing play in a different way, what kind of incentives are there for getting involved in sort of the Indiegogo, and what can people get out of it?
The incentives are absolutely nuts, because I have some brilliant producers, and Marianne has been very generous. So obviously, like all commercial plays, we're raising investment or raise investment. But there are a couple of things we'd love to do with the production, which are luxury things. Obviously, everyone is professionally paid and stuff. That's all great. But there's a few things we'd love to do, which if there was more money in the bank, we would do. But if we don't do it, it'll be okay. You know, not the production okay, but that no one will miss it. But if we also do these extra things, then I think people will be really happy. So the Indiegogo campaign, which if you go to Indiegogo and just search for Dark Sublime, people can make a contribution of any amount of money, because, you know, I'm working with some extraordinary emerging producers in Rigmarole Productions, which are the lead producers, Jamie Chapman-Dixon, here's Scotty Jones, and then lots of associates on top of that. Some of the perks include having your name in the West End programme, which, you know, is a wonderful thing. When you open a programme, you know how many thousands of people are going to see that, knowing that you supported a play about young gay women, about a subject matter I hope people care about, and a group of people that care about telling this story. The highest perk is really cool. It's £1,000, and I know we've sold 2 of them, maybe 3 of them now. And it is a lunch with me, Marina Sirtis, in my favourite club in the world, the Groucho Club in Soho, which is a private members club on Dean Street. And it will be a lunch with us, chatting about the play, listening to whatever people have to share with us, plus going to see the play and all of the rewards and things, all sorts of merchandise as well. We also have a supporters gala, which is going to be really lovely, which I'll be inviting some very special friends to, which I cannot tell you who they will be, but they will be rather familiar, I'm sure, as well as everyone who's supported the production. And we'll also have some, you know, some canapes and some drinks, get to meet the cast, get to chat to us, and, you know, really cross that frontier, you know, pun intended, with getting to know why we've made this show. So, I mean, look, we live in a time where the arts isn't supported like it was, say, 20 years ago. And actually doing something like Indiegogo is becoming a necessary evil, but actually some really blimmin' cool perks. And if you want to go and have probably some of the nicest food in London with me and Marina and geek out about whether it's Councillor Troy or episodes of the original series of Doctor Who and Blake 7, and if you are able to afford that, then that would really help out these emerging theatre companies. Or if you just think, do you know what, I can't get to see the production, but I'm really glad this is happening, then, pop your name in our programme for 50 quid, or, send us a tenner, whatever it is, because we'll spend it wisely, and it'll enable us to, do more stories like this, as well as make sure this production is as fine as it possibly can be. And, financially it does what it does. Who knows? We might, take it to another planet. You never know.
We'll be sure to put those into the show notes as well, so people can just listen to this podcast and immediately click onto that as well. But and you've mentioned it a couple of times that you've got your own podcast as well. If people wanted to find that out, check out, what's that all about, Andrew?
What's it all about? Long story short, I met an actor who wanted to sort of just cry on me and say how unfair it was that she wasn't working. And I'm somebody who has a sort of very busy mind, so I tend to fall asleep at night listening to podcasts and the radio and documentaries. There's always something on. And I met up with my friend, and she was working these hideous hours in this hateful call center. And I said, what are you doing to enrich your life? Because obviously everyone has to earn a living, and no actor works every day of the year. And she said, I just don't have time. I don't have time to go to the theatre. I don't have time to get involved in classes. And she showed me a calendar, and this call centre was paying, rubbish money. And, she was just travelling all the time to go to this shit job. And anyway, bless her, I jumped on the tube, put in my earbuds, and I was listening to some pretentious theatre podcast that was talking about, Greek tragedy and its representational form in regards to modern theatre, or something dry as hell that probably only me and a few other people would be even slightly interested in. But again, it was lots of sort of white successful people talking about how great it is to be white and successful. And so I thought of my friend that I met, and I thought about her journey, the fact that she was travelling for about an hour to get to this hateful call centre. And I thought, I wonder if there was something I could put out for free that would be talking to people about their whole selves as theatre makers, whether that's directors, designers, actors. And then that next morning I woke up to the Chris Evans breakfast show, that zany, upbeat, silly show that it was. And then I merged all sort of three in my head and said, let's create the Show People podcast with Andrew Keates, which I bring on. It's a fortnightly it is a fortnightly podcast, and basically I sit down for a couple of hours with an extraordinary theatre person, and we, to quote The Sound of Music, we start at the very beginning and find out how they grew up, their hardships, their successes, what they've learned, what drama school was like. We showcase new writing. We do a thing called Dramatic News, which covers all the latest news, or theatrical tips. I do get my theatrical tips out and suggest things that people should see. And I also do a very silly thing at the every episode called Funny 5 Minutes. It's where I ask some of the most ridiculous questions that I've ever asked actors. And we have we have extraordinary people on there, from choreographers like Bill Deemer, actors like Annette Badland. In fact, there's a couple of Star Trek actors I've done, Terry Farrell and Jerome St. John Blake, Dominic Keating, because Dominic was staying with me for a couple of weeks, and I said, right, this will pay your rent, we're doing a podcast. And they really go anywhere, and actually the tone of the podcast changes, because it all comes down to what I asked them at the beginning of the episode, which is, do you want a cup of tea or a glass of wine? Depending on what route that is, depends on what the episode is. So it's called the Show People podcast with Andrew Keates. It's available on only the very best podcast platforms. And yeah, I'm sure you can pick it up. Well, I know you can pick it up in iTunes, and I'm sure, as you find with this podcast, I find it beguiling that my voice is listened to all over the world, and has been to countries that I will never visit. and yet there are people listening to the Show People podcast in Ukraine or Zambia, and it's a wonderful, wonderful thing to discover.
Oh, definitely. That's a new podcast I'll be subscribing to. I'm sold on that one. So,
I hope so.
If people wanted to kind of reach out to you, kind of follow the latest Dark Sublime news, when kind of tickets are on sale, where could kind of people find that stuff online, Andrew?
Yeah. So the very easiest way, because pretty much everyone is on Twitter or Facebook, right? So for Twitter, go to @DarkSublimePlay. And you'll find all the ticket links, etc. there. And the same is true of Instagram and Facebook, @DarkSublimePlay. If you go to atgtickets.com and just type in Dark Sublime, it'll take you straight to the booking link. We are just about to launch the Dark Sublime website, which will be a hub, which will have all of the various video messages, creative content we've created. We've had messages endorsing the show from people like Robert Duncan McNeil to Sylvester McCoy, Sean Pertwee. So we're creating that hub for our superfans, and we're probably going to launch a shop as well with some exclusive merchandise. Indiegogo is the same. Just search for Dark Sublime on Indiegogo, or of course look at the show notes for this episode. And yeah, finally, just connect with us, because we share so much exclusive content about, when we go into rehearsal. Of course, we'll be releasing our rehearsal shots there. We'll be releasing our videos supporting the show. We do also, our Twitter account is fantastic. I mean, we do sci-fi trivia to videos from, really iconic sci-fi stars that have got in touch. So yeah, I would say start with Twitter, and you can't miss us.
That's excellent. Well, thank you so much for joining me today, Andrew. I can't wait to see this play, and it's been a real pleasure to talk with someone like yourself that's just so passionate about something like this, and I know that's going to transmit to the stage.
Oh, I hope so. I wouldn't do it if I didn't care about it, and I care about everyone involved in this, and it's just a real honour to do it. To be honest with you, it's just a massive honour, and the fact I get to do it with Marina Sirtis, I mean, find me a luckier director in the world.
Absolutely. She's just one of a kind. I've seen her at many a convention on the stage, and she just gets people in the palm of her hands every time. So I'm looking forward to seeing that in the West End.
Absolutely. And no doubt she will be in control of this interview far more than I am.
I look forward to it.
Thank you very much for coming on and stuff. I'm really looking forward to chatting with you about the play.
You're my second Scot today.
Are you? Who was your first one?
My first Scot was someone from The Big Issue who lived in Glasgow.
I'm a Spurs fan as well, so, I'm already better than him.
Got to get finished before the match starts.
Absolutely, no doubt about that.
How's a Scot? Wait a second, how is a Scot a Spurs fan?
Well, they used to be my team when I was playing, Football Manager, so I became naturally invested in the team, how they doing, how they getting on, and it just became an obsession like that, so, yeah, as crazy as it is.
Well, isn't it crazy? Did you ever think?
Do you think we're going to make the Champions League final?
Well, we might. I mean, when you get to the last four, you're 2 games away from winning it.
I'm going over to Amsterdam for the semi-final without a ticket, so hopefully it'll be celebrating a good time. If not, it'll be maybe a few drinks.
Are you going?
Yeah, I'm going. Yeah, I've booked the flights over, but no ticket, so hopefully it'll be a good away day regardless.
So, that's next Wednesday, right?
We'll play them at White Hart Lane on Tuesday, and then
That's right, and then we play them the following Wednesday.
Yes.
In Amsterdam. Yeah, unfortunately, I'll be able to watch the game on Tuesday. I've actually rearranged my schedule. Or what do we say in England? Schedule. In Britain, schedule.
Yeah, schedule. Yeah.
I've been here too long. So I've rearranged my schedule on Tuesday so that I could watch the match. And then the following Wednesday, where will I be? I'm going to be in England, I think.
There you go.
No, it's the 7th.
7th, yeah.
Right. Yeah. No, I'm going to be in England, so I'll be in a pub somewhere. Yeah.
Hopefully we'll be celebrating together.
Yeah, I'm jealous that you're going, and I'm really upset because I thought, gosh, if we make the final, June the 1st, I'm going to be in Europe, and then I thought, oh no, it's June the 1st, it's a Monday. It's a Monday! It's the first day of rehearsals for my play.
Oh no, I suppose you can't pull a sick day on the first day.
No, I can't miss the first day of rehearsal, that would be bad.
So Marina, what kind of attracted you to this play? How did you come to be involved in it?
Well, I met Andrew. I don't know if he told you this. I met him at the Birmingham Destination Star Trek convention year before last, and we hit it off, just as people, right? And so, during the course of our new friendship, we kind of expressed the desire to work with each other. I had heard of him, really promising, up and coming, young director, and obviously he knew my work, and he was a bit of a fan. So we just thought, wouldn't it be great if we could actually do a play together? And I had been looking to come back to England to do a play, because I won't do theatre in Los Angeles, because they don't respect it. They think you're doing a play because you can't get a movie or a TV show. And so I love it too much to have to, plus if you're working in one of what they would call in New York, what they would call like off Broadway houses, you don't get paid. I mean, you get like $9 a performance for your petrol. And I was like, do you know what? I've been doing this for 42 years. I don't work for free anymore. I mean, that's just absurd, So I don't do theatre in LA. I've had many arguments with other LA actors who stick up for the fact that you don't get paid, but they've never won me over. But I wanted to do a play in England. It didn't have to be London. I just wanted to come back home. So Andrew started like looking for stuff, and he sent me a few things, and they some of them were promising, and I was thinking about them, and then he sent me Dark Sublime, which he had got from Mark Keates, who knew Michael Dennis, the writer. So he sent me it, and I read it, and I called him back like instantly and said, okay, did Michael know me when he wrote this? And Andrew said, no, he didn't. And I was like, well, it's me. It's absolutely me. I mean, the certain personality traits are just me. Some of the relationships are very similar to relationships that I have in my life. I mean, Marianne is very close to Marina. It's kind of weird. She played Ophelia. I played Ophelia. I mean, there are so many similarities. It's kind of eerie, So I read it and I said, well, I've got to do this. I've absolutely got to play this part. And so we started then hunting for producers and a theatre, and Rigmarole Productions decided to produce it, and Traff Studios said, we'd love to put it on, and we're doing it. And I'm still a bit in shock and awe that it's actually happening.
How does it feel for a London girl to be going to like the West End, to be on those stages? You think of so many of the famous names that have been there before, and you're now going to become one of them. How does that feel?
You're going to make me cry. That's how that feels. I mean, I'm making my West End debut at the age of 64. So all you young actors out there who are, kind of disheartened because, it's not happening, or it's not happening fast enough, or whatever, stuff you're going through right now. Look at me. I didn't get a great series until I was in my early 30s, and I'm making my West End debut at the age of 64. You just keep going. And good things hopefully happen down the road. Eventually, eh?
When you were sort of talking about sort of being offered a role like this, is it kind of invigorating when an opportunity like this comes along? Because there's been a lot made, especially in theatre, about sort of the lack of roles available to women. I mean, you get certain plays.
Women of a certain age.
Yeah, like how,
you should be talking to Michael Dennis about this, because I read an interview that he did last week. Well, I read the interview last week. I don't know when he did the interview, but he was saying that he set out specifically to write a play for women of a certain age, because he personally found those actresses very interesting when he went to the theatre and thought they were underused. And so the three women in the play are middle-aged women. Do you know how rare that is? I mean, it's almost like unique. It's almost finding a pearl in an oyster, because people don't, I mean, especially, listen, I'm talking from living in the United States for 30 years. People do not write leading roles for old women in America. So the fact, I mean, it's not that I don't work. I actually work a lot, but I'm never number one on the call sheet. I'm a guest star usually, or somebody's mum, or, you know, it's like I'm never, you know, they're not writing for me. I am reading for a part that's already been written, you know. So it's a very different situation. So to come to the UK, to come back home, and to have this opportunity to do what I love to do the most, which is stage work. I mean, I can't believe, I really can't believe it's happening. I'm so excited, I'm so terrified, I'm so nervous. This is like a dream come true for me. It really is. And so, it's like, thank you, you know, Andrew, thank you, Rigmarole, thank you, Michael Dennis, for writing such a brilliant play, because parts like this don't come along very often for women of my generation.
And what you were sort of talking about, there's a lot of personal experiences that you can relate to with this character. Is there anything that you've been able to bring from your experiences on TV, you know, stage, life, that you thought, oh, I can bring this, or maybe a little line that I can change because I can tell you this is a bit different to how it was on paper?
Oh, there's so much. That's what I'm saying. It's really a bit terrifying. There's so much in this play that I can go, well, I know exactly what that is, because I know exactly how to play that, because I've done that. That's happened to me, you know. And I know Marianne is not Marina, but we have a lot of similarities. Let's not be disingenuous. There are a lot of similarities, but I read it every day. I mean, because basically I started, you know, at my age, the lines don't go in as easily as they used to, so I started reading it every day in January, so that I would be really prepared when we start rehearsal. But every day I read it, you know, every time I read it, I find something new, and then it suddenly occurred to me yesterday that this isn't just about being gay, and this isn't just about being in a sci-fi show, and it isn't just about relationships with fans or relationships with other people, love relationships or otherwise. This is also a little documentary on what it's like to be an actor. It's like a roadmap of what an actor's life is like as well. So, and I didn't realise that until yesterday. That, oh my God, that's in there too. There's so many levels to this play that, and that's one of the reasons that I'm just literally doing a little dance every morning that this is happening.
What's your process like for starring on stage compared to television and film? Is there certain ways that you prepare in a different way? You were talking about reading the script daily. Obviously, you've been used to getting maybe a script on the day or the morning. What's your kind of process like for stage?
Well, for stage, it's very different because, you know, for TV or film, because everything changes from minute to minute, I never learnt the lines until the night before we were going to shoot the scene. There was no point, because we might get a whole new rewritten scene, you know, that day. As we're walking out the studio, they might hand you and say, these are tomorrow's pages, you know, they've changed. So in TV and film, I just always learn the lines the night before, which makes it very tiring, actually, because you're working 16 or 18 hours and then you're going home and having to learn, you know, 6 pages of dialogue or whatever. Theatre, now to be honest, because of the nature of this play, I haven't had to do a lot of research. You know, because it's me, you know, it's my life. I'm an aging actress who used to be in a sci-fi show just like Marianne, so I'm not having to do a lot of research. Maybe a little bit into the sci-fi shows of the late 70s, the English sci-fi shows. I don't remember a lot of English sci-fi shows of the late 70s, to be honest. I mean, I remember Doctor Who, obviously, but I mean, things like Battlestar Galactica, and they were American shows, you know, so I'm going to have to talk to Michael about that one, what he sees. But, yeah, my process is, I actually just really, really, really have to have the lines so embedded in my brain that I don't have to think about what I'm going to say, so that I can actually experience what I'm supposed to experience in the scene. I don't like to plan ahead, especially on TV and film, but it works on the stage as well. I don't like to plan ahead how I'm going to play the part. And apparently, me and Meryl Streep have this in common. I just thought I'd throw that in there. We just learn the lines, and then whatever happens because you're learning the lines on your own, so you're working in this little vacuum. Now, when you get on the set or when you get on the stage with the other actor, then you figure out how you're going to play it, because you're reacting. Acting is reacting. Acting is listening and reacting to what the other person's saying and how they say it. So it's like a symbiotic thing between the actors, We kind of give and take off each other. So that's how I work. Doesn't work for everybody, but for me, that's the only way I can do it. And people say to me, "You're always so in touch with your emotions," and I'm like, "Well, yeah, because if the lines are there and you don't have to think about them, you really can then just let the words work on you as you say them. And if you're meant to cry in a scene, you'll cry naturally. You won't have to force yourself, because you're being truthful, So that's I think that answered your
And kind of finally as well, like, I think of something like Star Trek, for example, where so many of the actors have gone from stage to screen and screen to stage. Have you received any sort of advice or tips from any of your sort of fellow Trek thespians, someone like Sir Patrick Stewart, have given you any advice ahead of this kind of big play?
They wouldn't dare. They wouldn't dare give me advice. I'd be like, "Excuse me, I've been doing this for 42 years, does the phrase teaching your mother to suck eggs come from it, So, no, I mean, the person that I would, maybe have a conversation with at some point is Sir Patrick, because, pretty much only he has had so much more experience on stage than I have, and only he has had the experience of being the star of the show in the West End, which I have not experienced at all. I don't know what that entails, if in fact it entails anything other than showing up, doing the show, and signing a couple of autographs at the stage door. I don't know, but yeah, maybe I'll have a conversation with Sir Patrick down the road. But right now, it's kind of weird that we never really, when we were doing Star Trek, we never let ourselves kind of get sucked into how huge it was, because it would have, and I don't think it was done consciously. I mean, looking back now in hindsight, that it was really good that, because we were all such good friends, that the atmosphere on the set and the fun that we were having making the show, it was so, we were tired because we worked long hours, but it was pretty much stress-free, because we didn't have any prima donnas, or anything like that. So basically, like I said, although Star Trek was huge, we didn't know it was huge, and so it didn't kind of impact us or our personalities, if you like. So I'm hoping it's the same when you're doing a stage play. You don't really know. There's, 200 people in the audience of a night, and you're just hoping they enjoy it. Don't chuck tomatoes at you, I suppose. I don't know.
And kind of finally, like, I've seen you at conventions. I've been to, I regularly attend sort of the destination Star Trek events here in the UK, and you're always got such a great advocate for politics, representation, and such like. And when I was kind of reading about this play and stuff, I could picture you perfectly in this role where it is going to be an LGBTQ character that you're going to be taking on. You seem like a perfect kind of fit for a role like this. Is this something you always look for in your work that kind of helps to kind of overcomes barriers and gives you a chance to kind of represent for sort of minorities?
Well, ideally, one would like that to be the case, but unfortunately, that stuff is, well, let me just put it this way, in America that stuff's not written very often, right? So, I just have to take a job. It doesn't say anything, it's just pure entertainment, but I need to pay my bills. So there is an element. I've kind of become in my old age the equivalent of Michael Caine in his later years when he said yes to everything. You just don't know which one's going to be your last job.
You never know, you might end up in a Christopher Nolan movie.
Oh, well, that would not be a bad thing. Really, I don't, at this point, it's like, it's work. And as I'm saying, I'm a 64-year-old actress. There's not a lot of work. In fact, I would actually like to be in a superhero movie. That's one of the things I haven't done. And I didn't think that women my age could do it until I watched Wonder Woman, and there was Connie Nielsen being, Robin Wright, although I think Robin's quite a bit younger than me, but Connie Nielsen and I are of an age, and there she is looking, fierce in her outfit and being that character. And I thought, yes, you can, I can. Maybe that still is a possibility for me. But my dream is actually to come back and do British drama. I mean, that's the dream now. It's like I've done Hollywood.
Well, I can't wait. I'm going to see the show in mid-July, so I'm really looking forward to it. And I think many people that would listen to this or have crossed paths and have told you how much of a superhero you are to them, inspiring them to take on new roles in mental health and so on. So, I'm sure you're a superhero to a lot of people.
Oh, that's a nice thing to say. That's very sweet of you. You know what? It's the big mouse who expresses her opinions even when they're not asked for.
Keep fighting the good fight.
Okay, my darling, I will, and let's have fun in Amsterdam.
Oh, I certainly will. One way or another, I'll have fun. If it's a terrible result, I'm going to try to find a way to have fun anyway, but hopefully it all works out tonight.
Yeah, well, God bless my darling.
No,
Spurs fella Lily White.
Absolutely. All the best, Marina. Have a really good time and good luck with the play, okay?
Thanks, babe.
Bye.
Join the revolution. Join the Nerd Party.